Retired homicide detective. I've interviewed thousands of people, from serial killers to ministers. Welcome to the interview room. Welcome to the interview room, everybody. Karen and I are so grateful that you're here. We've got a little program set for you tonight. Hopefully we'll stimulate some thought and share with you some ideas. If you're new to the interview room, we're so grateful that you're here. We only ask that you like and subscribe and share this video with all your friends and your neighbors. We want to thank all of our Patreon members, our new members, Aaron, Catherine, Heather, Judy, Margaret, Laura, and Carolyn. We're so grateful for each of you and for all of our subs and our members here on YouTube for your support. We're so appreciative of each and every one of you. All parties are innocent until proven guilty in the court of law. Here at TIR, we follow the evidence wherever it takes us. And that means all of the evidence, plus or minus. Tonight, my special guest is the love of my life, my wife, Miss Karen. And those of you who have not met her, put your seatbelts on. She's a beauty. She's a former investigative journalist in the largest, one of the largest markets in Southern California, worked for the LA Times, dailies, and a variety of other print and video. There she is.
Hey, everybody. And thank you for that very gracious introduction. Love you, honey. You're so kind.
And for those of you who are new to our channel, we actually travel the country in an Airstream. We pulled the plug a little bit. It's been almost 2 years now, right, Karen?
It has. Yeah. Time's flown by so fast. Can't believe it.
It has flown. And each and every one of you, our TIR family and our subscribers, each and every one of you have been with us on the journey. And man, there's a lot more coming. In fact, we are here in the San Diego area because we met with Maya Miliette's family. And we had a whole day with them, and we're going to put something together later this week. Her preliminary hearing starts for Larry tomorrow morning at 8:30 in the Superior Court downtown San Diego. A lot of great people have been involved in that incident, and we say, we send our prayers and our thoughts for the district attorney down here. Summer Steffen is a good friend of mine. We've done many murders together back when I was active here in the San Diego County area. And also, it's really great to see others on YouTube, sticking to the facts and, pulling things together. There are some really smart people out there. And for that, I am grateful as well. So, that said, Karen, we've got a lot to cover, don't you believe?
We do. We should just jump right into it. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, we all know this gentleman here is innocent until proven guilty in the court of law. So these are strictly our opinions. They do not necessarily weigh in any way, shape, or form towards his innocence or guilt. However, I do have an opinion in relationship to some of his pre-incident behavior that has come out in the probable cause affidavit. And some, I think, all of us were kind of clicking along, but there were things that I was seeing that, quite frankly, lined right up with, and this is Buddy, by the way, if you're just seeing him in the background making his debut here, looking outside.
I was wondering what he was doing. I can hear his little collar shake. Chris and I are in two different areas here, but yeah, Buddy has the run of the place basically when we go live, as you well can imagine.
So obviously, this is why we are here tonight, for these 4 young lives, these 4 young adults, Kaylee, Madison, Xana, and Ethan. We're not here for the animal. He'll get his day in court. Go ahead.
And our thoughts and prayers go out to the families of these 4 beautiful students. We know there's a long road ahead now that the whole situation's in the court, with the court proceedings coming up. And again, our thoughts and prayers go out to these families who are, just what can you say? They lost their loved ones in a very vicious, violent, terrible way. And we're happy that we can be supportive here in TIR, and I know all of you and our TIR family is too. So we always obviously keep the victims and their families top of mind here.
Yep, always. So a couple of things that have jumped out at me and Karen. And honey, why don't you kind of lead us off in terms of what we know to date? Just kind of let's first of all, we titled tonight's show 12 times. Now, obviously, this is going to go towards what I would describe as pre-incident behavior. And what's interesting about this pre-incident behavior, in the affidavit, just to kind of kick this off right from the beginning, on August 21st, his phone, BK's phone, pinged outside of the victim's residence from 10:34 p.m. to 11:35 p.m. Now, this is just what we know. And then they say there are 12 additional times where that phone pinged. Well, I'm going to bring to your attention something that nobody has seen yet. At least they haven't connected the dot. And unfortunately, my mind does not shut off, just Karen will tell you. Working well over 13 years in homicide, almost 300 plus homicides under my belt in my career. And it's always great to have people, recite some of my cases. Brandon Wilson as an example. And he did not have a sheath. He just had his knife, and you can go watch that interview with that guy. But this is the type of personality that DM ran into that evening in the middle of the night. So going back to the August 21st, what's really interesting about that is what, Karen? What did we just share?
So Sunday, August 21st, 2022, as we recall from the affidavit, that Kohberger's cell phone pinged outside of the girl's house at 1122 King Road from 10:34 p.m. to 11:35 p.m. Sunday, August 21st was exactly 12 weeks before the night of the murders.
12 weeks before the night of the murders. So now, what does that mean? It means, remember, a PCA, right? Probable cause affidavit is just to give you a flavor of the evidence that they have. And in the PCA, they talk about 12 times before the murder. But subtly, they drop in there August 21st, which is exactly 12 weeks before the homicide. So if there's a correlation there, we're going to find out. We don't know, but I find that very interesting that they kind of put that out there. The other thing is, we have multiple trips with this guy, not only post-incident, but pre-incident. The traffic stop on that 21st with the officer, 10:34 to 11:35 p.m. It's very important, I would submit to you, because it shows pre-incident behavior in relationship to his being in that area. We've seen a lot of things floating around on social media about his family, sister and all this stuff. I don't have that information. And I don't know if anybody's been able to confirm it, but that's even worse for him, if that is the case. Because that then goes back to what I said from the very beginning, is this guy is very, very familiar with this neighborhood. And I stand by that. And now the affidavit is showing that, yes, in fact, he was familiar with it. And the affidavit is also showing that his vehicle was positioned into an escape position, and it was the house right next door where the majority of the sound and video was established. There's a lot of stuff floating around. Guys, don't grab this stuff until it's verified by the authorities. On YouTube, we do not know where some of this stuff comes from. I mean, it can be, it can come from anybody. And the technology today, they are able to, make pictures, they're able to make video, they're able to do all kinds of stuff. Again, rely upon what the law enforcement agencies have released into the public arena. And
Right.
that way, go
And
ahead.
because there's a gag order, obviously, media is not going to get their questions answered right now until the court proceedings. So that's going to require a lot of patience on people's parts. Don't know if they have it, but yeah, we just have to be really careful. And of course, we won't be releasing anything like that here. If it's hearsay, if it doesn't come from them, can't be verified. All of this all the details will eventually come out in court, and that's part of our system, and that's what makes our system so great. But yeah, it's going to be a while.
So let's talk about defense strategy for a minute. All right. Karen, are you up for that?
Sure.
All right. So what gaps in the defense strategy in going on right now? What they're going to do, well, there's a couple of things that they're going to do. Don't hang up right immediately on the DNA on the snap until we get information back from the lab that says this belongs to this guy. Right now, we have, genealogical familiar DNA, i.e., they picked up the trash, identified DNA in his family line. And then, of course, when he was in custody, immediately, I know how that works. They grabbed a swab and they sent that up to the lab quickly to match it to that snap and that sheath. Everybody's saying it's on the sheath, which is, I think, again, it's a broad concept of being on the sheath, but the affidavit specifically said it came from the button of the snap. So my assumption, and if you have not seen Francine Bardol, you need to go watch her videos here. We've had Francine on. She is the inventor of the Bardol method for touch DNA. She's the gal that actually figured out how to do that. And she's an amazing human being. Really, really smart. Honey, Karen, do you have anything? And by the way, I call her Honey just out of habit. So, please don't beat me up because I've called a woman Honey. She's been my sweetheart for many years. So go ahead.
So before we talk about defense strategy, I would just like to review all that police have. And
Okay.
And it's when we go through these, you go down the list, you're like, wow, that's a lot against this person. And then when you go over on the other side and you talk about defense strategy, then you can kind of see it from a different angle and think and see, oh, okay, maybe that could be used to his benefit, to his not, whatever. So let me just tick off the list that we know about from the probable cause probable cause affidavit. So, okay, we've got DNA on the knife sheath snap. We had Billy Little Jr., amazing attorney on a few days ago. Go watch that video if you haven't seen it. Billy has a K-bar knife. A lot of people do. He pulled it out. He showed us how the snap opens and closes and exactly where they would have swabbed for DNA. Okay, so we've got DNA at least on that knife sheath. Number two, we have a witness. We have DM, okay, who was on the second floor. She came face to face with him. Extremely chilling, as we know. Number three, a shoe print outside her bedroom door. That is huge. And then number 4 and 5, we've got all the cell phone data that was outlined in the affidavit that we can see of his movements, of what Chris was talking about pre-incident, how he was at outside the girl's home at least 12 times in the months leading up to the homicides. And then we've got the video surveillance footage of his car. We've got it going out, driving into the neighborhood, positioning, driving by the house several times, doing a 3-point turn at one point, coming back, and then speeding away from the girl's house at, I believe it was 4:25 a.m.
Mhm.
So that's a lot of evidence. That appears to be a lot of evidence in this case. And that's what is gives us hope for the criminal proceedings ahead.
So, like every defense attorney out there, they're already starting to peel this thing apart. Whenever you see Mark show up from the old OJ trial from back in the day, it must be a high profile, and therefore I must insert myself and try this case in the media immediately. And that tells you something about the concern of the defense when you have other individuals already popping up to say, oh, that you could drive a truck through the probable cause affidavit. And so there is a couple of things that we just need to keep in mind. Number one, okay, is there are going to be a whole bunch of trials, i.e. hearings, small hearings, which are mini trials coming up. And they're going to go, there's a couple directions they're going to go. The first direction they're going to go is they're going to immediately start attacking the evidence. They're going to try to get evidence suppressed, quickly, anything that they can. And then they're going to go after the investigation. And what I mean by that is the investigators will then start going on trial because you have a defense attorney who is familiar with how to do that already. She's had many, or she had at least one high-profile trial kicked off because of the validity of the testimony of the officer. And then they're going to go after how it was processed and collected. That's where you and I, everybody here, we've talked about getting fonged. Okay. Back in the day when that trial went on in California, OJ's trial, everybody went on trial except for OJ. And I would submit to you, and I'm going to go on the record tonight, you're going to have a similar situation. Everybody will be on trial except this guy. That will be the defense strategy. They will attack all of the evidence, and and now the DA, we have to think about, okay, well, how is the DA going to overcome that, right? Even though there is DNA on the sheath, i.e. the finger, then they will attack the process. And what Mark just did by weighing in early is he signaled to the media, theater. And I said this in the Barry Morphew case before that ever started, and we see the result of that. And now I would submit to you that they've already started in this case.
So I would jump in and say that people just need to remember that the way these huge cases go, it becomes theater and it becomes a game. I don't say that to lessen anything for the victims or the victims' families. But what we're already seeing are chess pieces being moved, and we saw this from day one. This is just my analogy, in my opinion, of how we think about this. Because we all want justice. At least most normal people want the right thing to be done, okay, for these families. We want justice. And we're confident police have the right person. A 19-page affidavit only outlines a long list of evidence against this person.
51%.
So there's confidence here, okay? Now the game begins because there's a gag order. So police, prosecution, they're not going to be talking. Now you're going to have, as Chris says, the defense attorneys, the national spotlight defense attorneys out there giving their opinions on this. And it all takes place in the theater of the courtroom. And all of us following this case are going to be watching it. And it really is a game, because it's going to pull you emotionally one way, and then it's going to pull you the other way. You're going to feel like, especially if you read the affidavit, oh, wow, we're getting justice for these families. They got the right guy, all this. Then you get into the court and you see what unfolds with our legal process and defense attorneys, and then you're going, oh, wow, they're poking holes in this, So it's constantly this back and forth emotional thing as we're going to be watching this. And we know this because we've seen this show before. Obviously, O.J. Simpson, many, many, many other cases that many of you have followed. And so you know what is going to play out. This case is no different.
Yeah, so they will attack the process. They will attack the evidence. They will attack the collection. And then they will, put on it's some other dude. That will be the defense. It's sod. And they will utilize the fact that the house was a party house. And it's enough smoke and mirrors to get, if you just look at how the chat is going right now, it's enough smoke and mirrors for somebody out of, believe it or not, there are 15 jurors because 12 and then 3 alternates. somebody is going to go, well, it could be sod, and that is a potential, unless we have an experienced district attorney who has done these high profile incidents like this. And so he gets a team together that is able to counter, and that's Buddy making noise over here. He gets a team together and starts disassembling any of the potential avenues that they could come driving down. Where the suspect is toast in a couple of different directions. His pre-incident and his post-incident behavior. His pre-incident behavior that we know of is pretty damaging because they've only released one tidbit of what this guy was doing 12 separate times before we knew what he did inside of the house. And so that in of itself, I would prepare you all, myself included. Let's just, when this trial starts to get closer, you're going to see a ramp up of not only the media interest, but in the defense interest. You're going to see more talking heads like, the folks that we're already starting to see on the national networks. I am pro-victim. I always have. And I've been on many shows. And the one thing I will plug here for Nancy Grace is she has been on that other side, losing a family member and then turn that into action. And so that's why she's so passionate. And Billy, as you know, he's been a defense attorney forever, and we've been close friends forever. He's handled 17 capital murder cases.
You're talking about Billy Little Jr., who was our guest last week, who's been on before. Yeah.
Yeah. So the science
Go ahead.
May seal the deal, but what I'm trying to prepare everybody for is all the bantering that's going to go on. And so don't get frustrated, I guess, where I'm going with this. And I talked to Mary, Chris, and Richard last night as an example about Maya's case coming in. It's just the prelim this week. And how she's going to be, put on trial. And Larry will be sitting there, with his suit. And he will be the good guy in the room. That's the system. It's an adversarial system. Okay. So I'm hoping, and I don't see this guy, and you guys tell me what you think, but Karen, do you see this guy pleading in any way, shape, or form?
I don't. Based on the personality type we're dealing with here, from what we can gather.
Yeah, he's not going
my opinion.
He's not going to plead. He may kick out. He may give his attorney a lot of grief, but I don't see him going down and saying, okay, yeah, I did it. Here we go. I could be wrong.
I'm just going to throw out there, if this guy studied criminology, if he studied under a very respected doctor of forensic psychology, if he read any of her books, if he had the interest in the criminal mind, like we're led to believe based on what we know about his schooling and his past, he wants a trial.
Yeah,
my opinion.
I love this comment right here. He is a star in his universe. Isn't that true? Is that not true? And Catherine, who was his professor, is just devastated. Gary is a colleague of hers. We invited her on the show, but she's like everybody else right now. She's trying to figure this out on how this wire did not connect correctly. So let's go over some of his post-incident behavior that's going to show consciousness of guilt and mens rea, an evil mind. His pre-incident behavior, we don't have a whole bunch on. I guarantee you they're going to go back and they're going to talk about when he was a kid, all of his medical issues, if he had any. They're going to lay it out, that he had some type of malfunction, drug problems, and he overcame them, all that stuff. If that exists, that will come into play. Okay, that will come into play. And they will take it all the way back as far as they can get it. And you'll see character witnesses coming forward to say, he wasn't a bad guy. He was, when I knew him, in ninth grade in high school, and et cetera. So all of that stuff's going to come into play.
And that's all their attempt to make him sympathetic, obviously, to appear sympathetic to the jury.
Scott Peterson. Right. He was a good guy. All he did was go fishing. Okay. Unfortunately, with his family, and who didn't return. So that's right now we know that 12 weeks out, he was stalking these victims. I would submit to you there's going to be a lot more. I've heard, back as far as June. And I don't know if there's going to be more.
What I found really interesting about that August 21st stalking incident, and where he spent an hour outside of their house, 2 minutes later at 11:37 p.m., he's pulled over by Leda County Sheriff's deputy. They don't say what for. They don't really say anything about that, but I found that piece really interesting. I'm sure you guys did too.
So let's think about this August 21st event for a moment. 10:34 to 11:35 p.m. That is 1 hour. I mean, literally, it's 1 hour. His phone is at that geographic region where these young adults are for 1 hour, 12 weeks before the homicide on the exact same day of the week, on Sunday. So now we have to ask ourselves, when we go back and we think through this, what was he doing for an hour? He doesn't live there. Is he doing recon to see the movements? Because this is earlier in the evening. Is he watching everything going on here 12 weeks before the actual strike? I would submit to you that the evidence is going to show, yes, he was. Because he's not going to take the stand and tell everybody what he was doing. But his attorneys will. His attorneys will say whatever they're going to say about it. But the fact is, he was there for 1 hour. And about 2 minutes later, as he's leaving, he gets stopped by a county sheriff in a traffic stop. Obviously, that deputy who stopped him did not know that he had been in the area for at least an hour. And so I think that body camera will be very significant to see how he handled that police contact. Because this was pre-incident. We already know what post-incident behavior looks like through the body camera film. Okay? We know that, when he looks over and then he looks at his dad, and there was one time in there where I saw them make eye contact, and I thought, man, these two are interesting. And I had to ask myself, how many other incidences are there in his past where dad came to his rescue?
Exactly. And, how many times did the parents cover for this guy's behavior?
Yeah, I see the chat is fast. So let me slow the chat down. Karen, hang on. Let me
Okay.
jump into the other side here and slow the chat down.
Okay.
Go
All
ahead.
right.
You got it.
Okay. I'll just take this minute or two just to welcome everybody. If you're just joining us, thank you so much. We're so grateful that you're here. We're grateful for our TIR family. I want to give a quick shout out to our amazing mods. They do an incredible job. Miss Sophia, Teresa M, Mimi J2, and Maui Girl. Thank you all so much. And again, thank you guys for being here. We will, I know you guys have a lot of questions. We'll try to get to them a little bit later when we're done going through this. But it has been really interesting going through this affidavit a couple of times with Chris and I, just talking and, me asking him questions and bouncing things off of him. And, there's so much in here. There's so many different ways to kind of look at it. So we're grateful that we have this opportunity with you all. We'll get your questions. But this pre-incident and post-incident stuff, I think, is so telling. Obviously, there's so many chilling things in here, especially obviously with DM coming face to face with this guy. All of it is just, it's incredible. And I think we all want to know more. We want to know more.
Lana's comment here. Honey, tell him what happened this morning when Buddy jumped. So,
Well,
Lana,
you tell him, Mike.
we are with you 100% because this morning, when I was in a deep sleep and Bud jumped on the bed and I jumped up because I was having a dream about this guy. And so I am with you 1,000%. And he scared the beans out of me. And so, and you'll tell him, I was like, whoa, what? And she's like,
Yeah, he wakes
Karen's
up.
like,
He's
what's
like,
wrong? What's wrong?
I just had a dream. The suspect was in the room. Like,
I did.
Okay, yikes.
Yeah. And so, we're all feeling this, right? I mean, how crazy was that? And is that? And it's interesting. All right. So let's go to post-incident, right after the homicide.
All right, and just to set it, police believe the homicides happened between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m.
Right. And so let's go to that day, November 13th, when he's leaving his apartment at 2:44 a.m. He's driving towards the house at 2:47. His phone stops reporting on the network. So remember, this guy has a degree in forensics technology. So the thought process is he's turning off the phone or putting it on airplane mode. That will stop the phone from transmitting to the towers. However, there are other things that I will not discuss that can fix that problem. Okay? Just let me tell you that. All right? In fact, you can look the company up. It's called Gladiator.
But also the fact that his phone was not on the network during those times obviously shows guilt. That was laid out in the affidavit, was it not?
Yeah. And what we want to do is talk. Yeah. And that's a great point. We want to show, right, consciousness of guilt. We want to show mens rea and that he had specific intent to commit this crime. And remember, the burglary charge is anyone who enters a building with the intent to commit theft or a felony. So in this case, it was a felony, i.e. the homicide. So that's why they charged him with burglary. Those are some of the elements to burglary: entering a building with the intent to commit theft or a felony. So his phone stops pinging on the network at 2:47. And by the way, when you go look at that company Gladiator, you won't be able to get in. It's just a website. Okay. 3:26, he's seen traveling on Indian Hills, and he passes a house headed towards the residence. And this is miles away by this point. 4:04, he comes into the area after going into the area the first time, i.e. the house at 11:22, and drives past it 3 separate times. He is definitely in motion to commit this crime, it appears.
I have a question for you. I got a question for you, Chris. So prior to November 13th, he was there 12 times. Okay. Why on the night of the murder is he driving past 3 times, doing a 3-point turn? He tries to park, he's unsuccessful. Wouldn't he have a more solid plan of driving in where he's stopping and going into the house?
Well, again, it all depends. I mean, it looks like he had mapped it out in his head, but it appears also that probably the heightened tension that this thing is going to go on, that he went from an organized to a disorganized potential event. Okay. I'm not convinced he didn't leave that sheath on the side of the victim by accident. It's possible he could have left it there thinking he had cleaned it. And it goes into the category of asking the cops, have you arrested anybody else yet? Is he trying to immediately, as part of his plan, throw off the investigation? Evident of the fact that he is also turning off his phone on the network. So that sheath, in my opinion, at this point, goes into that category. What is really interesting, though, is the fact that we have the back of the house up there, and behind the house, there is an ample place to sit back there and 100% surveil these victims. You have to think outside of the box with this guy, but he's also he's predictable. And we talked about that on our video about, the guy that did this, we're going to say he's familiar with the neighborhood, which he was. There could be some voyeuristic parts to this, which there may be. That evidence potentially will come. That block underneath the window just doesn't look right. Even to this day, to me, the cinder block, that one piece cinder block, not the whole ones, not the one in the front yard and, a couple others that are splash blocks around, but that one cinder block sitting in front of the back bedroom back there, that was bothersome for me from day one. And when I walked back up there as well, the point of entry was bothersome for me. And now we know that camera that I set on the house next door in the light bulb was probably the one that captured his movements in the car. So this is, again, we're only talking 51%, right? The fact that he drives by that house that evening 3 separate times, he is processing, I would submit, on, is there a better approach? And he's kind of second guessing himself for a moment, because he goes up, he makes that 3-point turn. Maybe there were other cars on that road already parked. We don't have evidence of that, because we have in the affidavit the authorities saying there were not very many vehicles in that area that evening. Okay. And so he then drives down. When he comes back the fourth time, he comes back down and he positions himself near the intersection of King and Queen. And what's interesting, if you now go on Google Earth and look at the house, 1122, and the house where I said the video was, they are both blurred out. Not just the victim's house, but the other house is too. And so if we think through that, then that video is maybe the primary video that they're referring to here, where the vehicle is seen coming and going. So we'll find out at some point what the totality of that is. But what we know is that evening on November 13th, 4 separate times. And remember, that is a trap at the end of that street. He's stuck. He is stuck. So there's going to be a lot more pre-incident behavior that we don't know about yet, where they're going to find, I submit to you, or they haven't, if they haven't already, okay, they're going to find additional evidence that showed this guy really thought through this process. Okay, I'm going to get a drink of water. What say you, hon?
Yeah, no, let's keep going. Let's keep moving on this. So that's all pre-incident. That's all leading up to the murders.
Okay, so at between 4 a.m. and 4:25, the authorities believe this is when the homicides go down. At 4:20, and this is interesting because the defense will tear this apart. The vehicle is seen leaving the area at a high rate of speed. So that should actually say between 4 a.m. and 4:20 a.m. and not.
Yeah, I noticed that too. Yeah, I noticed that too.
And not 4:25.
Yeah.
And they're in the direction of travels on those streets, King Street, Queen Street. Queen, it goes up and it wraps around the apartment complex. And then King goes up at dead ends, but then you can turn left on Queen. That's kind of written, interestingly as well, that this is maybe what Mark was talking about, driving a car through. But, juries are sympathetic to officers who've never experienced anything like this, who write these affidavits. And, they make mistakes. It doesn't mean the evidence is wrong, because the evidence will be the video. And that's what will go in. But it gives this defense attorney an option to kind of, go after the investigator a little bit on the stand. Hopefully he does not get that, but I think this defense attorney's pretty sharp. And so the vehicle is seen leaving at least by 4:20 a.m. Let's just say that. All right. At 4:48, the phone comes back onto the network. The phone is back on the network. So he is now, 20 minutes, 4:20, 4:40, 20, 30, 40. He's almost 30 minutes out away from wherever the point was. And his phone comes back onto the network. That is specific intent. He turned it off and he turned it on. Now, it's up to the defense to argue why he did that night. It's not up to the DA. because they can show that his phone is off and then on. Okay. And I've been in many murders trials where I've seen these adversarial roles just go at it, and the jury go, yeah, why did you do that up here? And ultimately, those answers come. All right, at 4:50 to 5:26, he's moving again. And he's headed towards Uniontown and then back towards Pullman, Washington. 5 cameras pick him up in Pullman at WSU. They see the Elantra coming into the campus.
And that was about an hour after he would have left the crime scene.
Right. They don't have any more activity until 9 a.m. But he's back in the car. And he's headed back towards Moscow. And he takes a back road, and at 9:12 to 9:21, his phone is pinging again in front of the Moscow Tower near the residence.
So that means he sat outside the crime scene for about 10 minutes.
Somewhere.
Near the King Road home. And this clearly, obviously, was before this was even reported to police. We know that phone call didn't come in until 11:58 a.m.
Yeah. So, yes, he is there. He's back. And so that's even more problematic for the defense. Because now it can be argued, well, you turned your phone off the first time, and then you turned it back on, but then you came back and your phone was on. Why did you do that? Now, of course, that will never be asked of him, but the defense, that will be what the DA will argue when they put the CAST, the cellular analysis survey team on from the FBI. And that expert testifies to all of this information that we're talking about now, the CAST team, and other pieces of evidence that nobody knows about yet, but I will submit to you, it will be dropped at some point. And there's a gag order, so they're not going to talk about it. So remember, we're talking about post-incident behavior and pre-incident behavior. This is critical to understand these nuances, okay? Because what the defense is going to do is attack the authorities for how they process the scene, how they did A, B, C, and D, right? They're going to try to fong them. Okay? Remember Barry Scheck years ago, honey, where he turns to the criminalist, and those of you who are new to our channel, he turns to him, and guys, you remember in the chat, where he goes, "What about that, Mr. Fong?" Okay. And our, our adage was, you don't want to ever get fonged. You don't want to ever get fonged. Okay, so what am I missing, huh? I mean, we're at 9:12, 9:21. He's back, and then he leaves, and he's back at his apartment at 9:32. So he drives over to see what's going on. It hasn't even been reported yet. What?
It was less than 5 hours later. Less than 5 hours later. Right.
That's going to leave a mark, as they say, not Mark G, a mark. The jury's going to go, wait a minute. This crime hasn't even been reported yet. You show up in the morning, you're on video, doing a 3-point turn, parking, phone off, but then you show up, and you can betcha they know where that vehicle was. I'm going to put a bingo card on that. I haven't used the bingo card in a long time. They know where that vehicle is. All right. So now it gets better. He's back at the apartment at 9:30 a.m. and he decides to take another drive.
Yeah, this
So
is interesting. This is the area that's wide open for speculation. We've seen a lot of what people think he was doing in these different areas that he was driving. It's all going to be speculation until we know, and we certainly don't know for certain at all. Not at this point.
Yep. But he decides he's going to go to Clarkston, and he drives by. His vehicle is seen driving past a coffee shop.
So that means he would have been back at his apartment for 3 hours from 9:30 in the morning till, at some point, because at 12:36, his car is seen passing this coffee shop on Port Drive in Clarkston.
Yep.
Okay.
And so, go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, and then 10 minutes later, he drives to an Albertsons grocery store in this area. And then he's seen on surveillance inside the grocery store for about 15 minutes. He's seen purchasing something in the grocery store, or a number of items in the grocery store. And then he's leaving. He leaves. And then there's this time gap from 1:04 in the afternoon to 5:32 in the afternoon. So that's 4.5 hours of a time gap. Again, all according to the affidavit.
And so One Shot asked the glove, we don't know. We just walked up and there it was, and both Karen and I, and of course the internet has me planning it there, as if I want to go to federal prison with my wife. Anyway, craziness. But we don't know. We don't know what the disposition of that glove is. We just know it was there, and they collected it. And we'll see, what's going to happen with that. Okay, so let's get back to your point, hon, where 12:49 to 1:04, he's seen on surveillance in the store. Okay, so what does that mean? In today's technology, if he paid by cash, there's the receipt. If he paid by credit card, there's the receipt. He's on video. We know that for sure because they see him in the store. So the items that are listed on that receipt will be the investigative curiosity.
Yep.
What did he purchase? Okay. What did he purchase? And we do not have that answer, but the authorities do. Evident of the fact that they let us know that the Albertson is where he went. I had a case one time where the suspect threw a jacket, and I was able to, on every piece of clothing that's made sometimes overseas, there is what they call an RN number. And it's from the Federal Trade Commission. If you guys get a chance, look at your labels on some of your clothing. There's an R, it says RN, and then with a number. Well, that's from the Federal Trade Commission. And what we used to do is we could actually go back and trace that article of clothing to where it was manufactured, the lot that it was manufactured, the date, the time, the shift, where it was shipped, and to what stores, what retailers. And I actually got the case, the victim's name was Dave Tabor. I actually found that jacket where it was purchased across the freeway from where the suspect was murdered, and the date and time, and I actually got the receipt. So these are the type of things investigatively that these investigators will be able to put some of these pieces together. And that receipt in that Albertsons, as minutia as it is, potentially could be extremely important Extremely important. All right, so now he turns the phone off again. There's a gap, 1:04 p.m. to 5:32 p.m. This time for, whatever, 4.5 hours. He goes dark for 4.5 hours. Same with the cash, because there's going to be a receipt of the items purchased. Okay. Kimberly, great question. So now he goes again, he consciously turns his phone off from the system, i.e., the network. And so now this guy is thinking post-incident. He's thinking. Because what they're going to do is they're going to go back and they're going to look at his history and see how often he took his phones off the networks. And that will show a pattern of behavior for him. Evident of the fact that 12 weeks prior, he stopped on a Sunday. I don't think that's by accident, that he is there in that area on a Sunday. And that Sunday becomes the day of the target, but later in the evening. Now, only he's going to be the one to tell us what was going on, but they've got him 12 separate times and 12 weeks prior being there, 12 weeks to the day. We don't know what the other 12 are. It may be 11. But the affidavit says there were at least 12. Okay. And so he shuts off his phone again on the network for a 4.5 hour gap, and then he shows up in Johnson.
Now, some people have said it's Johnson, Idaho. Some people asked if it was Johnson, Washington. I think what's clear is either way, it's not Pullman, Washington, in his on-campus or his apartment at Washington State University, and it's not Moscow, Idaho. So it's obviously some other place. We're not sure, again, which Johnson it is, because we don't know if that's one of the typos on the affidavit.
Yeah, great point. All right, so now, again, we get another really interesting time gap. 5:36 to 8:30 p.m. Another 3 hours. He goes dark.
Yeah, what was this guy doing? Where was he and what was he doing?
Yeah. So here's an interesting thought that just came up. Stargazer, is there a dump? Just going to dump the weapon. Okay, I got it. Okay. I thought you meant there was a dump there in Johnson. That would have been really interesting.
Well, and here's something else to consider. The area between Pullman, Washington, and Moscow, Idaho, it's about an 8-minute drive, and that is more populated. There's through streets, obviously, from University of Idaho's campus to Washington State University's campus. But all around these two colleges, we thought it was quite rural. It's like rolling hills. That this time of the year, there's not greenery. It does look, it's agricultural, it's sparse. And if one was to dump something, there could be a million different places that you could dump something. It's not a built-up city. If you guys haven't seen our video where we drive through that whole area, please go back and watch that. If you've seen it, go back and look at it again, because we shoot it in a way that you can see the landscape and what this whole area looks like. So just going back, literally, he could have been in any place with a potential to get rid of stuff in wide, vast, open areas that are desolate, meaning desolate. There aren't people living there. There's no homes, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and if you want to, sometimes, right, where we get into the head and the mind of these guys, and these individuals, and I'm not saying we're in his head here, but sometimes they go through such length to think this out, but they don't realize post-incident there are a lot of moving parts to taking 4 lives. And even though he had, the wherewithal that evening to accomplish the task and get out of there, there were a lot of mistakes that this guy made. And he's not really, the rocket scientist that he's projecting himself to be intellectually. In fact, if you go back and you look at what Dr. Picotto said, and the panel, by the way, we're putting the panel back together post-incident. I talked to Gary and Ann today and Coop, so we're trying to figure out a plug-in, so don't miss that one. I've got them coming back. And we all sit on the Cold Case Foundation, so they're just a phone call away. And they want to come back and talk because Gary, he's nailed this personality before anybody knew. And I think we nailed, the first part of this. Thank you. Top of the morning to you. So we'll see. So he shuts down off the network again. And in this affidavit, that's where it ends. Off the network on the 13th, 5:36 to 8:30 p.m. So there is enough right there, 51%, to get up to the next place, i.e., that's all we're going to give them right now. Now, November 18th shows up. He changes his license plates, which was already in motion, to re-register his car from Pennsylvania. So he gets his plates. He puts them on. On the 29th, Ellie releases the information about the Elantra. We're looking for an Elantra. And I've seen some things, about the FBI got it wrong, on the dates and the times. That's really, the year is really not going to be relevant in trial. And if the defense goes that way, a jury's going to say, well, yeah, isn't an Elantra. If it's an Elantra, that's the vehicle they said it was. The year, they can change. Okay, so I don't see that being a big deal. That's just my opinion. Because and a lot of times experienced attorneys know if they go down that rabbit hole, that opens up other doors for other conversations that they don't really want to get into about the vehicle. So that can be a very slippery slope pretty quickly. All right, let me grab some of this, some of these questions. Thank you. Go ahead, Karen. Anything you're thinking? So December 13th comes around. The vehicle is captured, headed eastbound across the country on a license plate reader in Loma, Colorado. Now, one other thing I want to point out real fast while it's on my mind is, remember when we were coming in to Moscow, the cameras, the traffic cameras?
Yep.
Okay. This guy avoided every one of those intersections on that State Highway 95. And he went around and then he got onto the other side. But we actually have video coming all the way in to Moscow. And I'll put something together and put it up so you guys can see everything before he got there, i.e. up into the neighborhood. We didn't know the path, obviously. We just stayed on the 95, but it is extremely rural. What, any thoughts on that, Karen? On kind of give everybody a flavor of what the neighborhoods look like.
Well, yeah, I just did. And go back to the affidavit, and you guys can see how police outlined his route and going in between his campus and University of Idaho. And it wouldn't surprise me if he studied different ways to go, and if he was, that smart as he liked to project himself as, maybe he did think about cameras. He wasn't that smart because he was captured on them. But certainly if he's stalking them and had 3 months plus to plan this, you would think he would definitely plan a route around the cameras that he saw.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, I was looking at some of the comments coming in. Yeah, great comments too, by the way, everybody. Really appreciate you. And how classy are you? Each and every one of you. We're so grateful. So grateful. I mean, this young lady, this DM, she's been beaten up. I mean, there is just some major stuff that I wish people would just take a deep breath. That information's going to come out at some point, about what she was feeling, what she was thinking, and quite frankly, what she was doing. And the other young lady, young adult, was sleeping, it appears. I've got to be honest with you. The DM, and I said this the very first time we reported on, bringing this up, is she's lucky to be alive.
Absolutely.
She could have been victim number 5 in a split second. So obviously the question is, did he see her? Did he even see her? She saw him, but did he see her? So we have to really be careful about, her. She's a survivor. She is a survivor. She's not the bad person in this. And Urban, thank you so much for saying that. She's not a criminal. That other dude is the criminal. BK is the criminal. Right now, he's been charged with it, right? And so, let the system play out, but give her a break. Give her a break. I mean, the trauma, I can only imagine what she's gone through. Just horrendous. Okay, so he cuts off the network. We're back now. His car is captured in Colorado, December 15th. He's shown on the 2 body cameras. So even though the FBI says they were only on him in a short time, I'm going to tell you, okay, they had this guy pegged, and they had him on that whole route at some point, because that whisper stop in Indiana, they needed to grab something because it was fast and furious at that point. To match that DNA, I would submit to you that DNA came back and said male unknown at this point. And single source, only one person could have presented that DNA on that sheath. Don't miss that point. Only one person could have submitted that DNA on the sheath. So that means it's not mixed with any of the victims. It belongs to that suspect, that one single source person. So what are they doing, right? They do a whisper stop where, car to car, we used to say, you can't outrun the radio. Okay, so let them run. Okay. And, you get on the radio and say, look, I need you to stop that Hyundai. If you have any PC, to stop that car and see what's inside that vehicle right now. See if you get a visual on it. And lo and behold, they had probable cause to stop the vehicle. One, for following too closely. Yeah, it may be, cheesy, okay, but it's legal. And when you have a potential suspect who is, has murdered 4 innocent lives, and you have a cheesy stop, you probably want to use it. okay, under the law. And so they stopped that guy. And what I mentioned on Nancy Grace's show, there was a water bottle in the center console. I wonder if they were waiting for that guy to throw it out. Because the surveillance team that was probably following this guy, we now know later they were still on him at the house. And we also get another glimpse into his body clock of coming out at 4 o'clock in the morning with surgical gloves on and dumping his trash in his neighbor's house. Honey, what did you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, if that doesn't speak volumes, I don't know what does. And they saw him deep clean the Elantra when it was back parked at in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, at his parents' house. Deep cleaning. Now, that vehicle is now obviously impounded and in police custody. Even though it was deep cleaned, could they still get DNA perhaps from that?
Yes, absolutely. And you're right, 19. He was not OJ's attorney. He was on the advisory team. That's a good point. So you had Bailey, you had Barry Scheck, you had Johnny Cochran, and you had Mark in the background as part of the advisory. And he's popped his head up into this. If you notice that, don't you love America? But yes, absolutely. They will be able to get a ton of stuff out of that car still. And, they can use the MVAC system when Francine, the Bardot method. And I'm thinking that he really left that sheath at the scene thinking it was clean, i.e. he's probably wearing gloves, and didn't think I need to wipe off the thumb snap. He missed it. And that was the end of it for him. Because now he has to explain why his touch DNA is on that thumb snap, on that sheath next to that victim, Madison, by her leg in the room. His defense team has an uphill battle. So what are they going to do? They're going to argue the collection process. They're going to argue how long things sat and could there have been cross-contamination coming and going. And also the same thing with the footprint, the shoe print at the door in front of DM's apartment. They're going to argue, the process, not that it's there. They're going to argue the evidence collection, and they're going to throw shade as much as they can towards the process, not that it's there. And so we need to remember that it's there. Okay? And they're looking, obviously, they were looking, and they probably still are looking for shoes, clothing, because this is a really bad situation where there's cast off everywhere, including this individual's clothing. Where I talked about Brandon Wilson, the knife that he used, by the way, it wasn't in a sheath as it's reported. No, that's not true. Okay. He had it in his pocket, and he pulled it out, and he said, I had my knife right here, and it was in the ready position. And then he pulls it out. And if you want to see that, you can go watch that. I set it up in a playlist. Okay. So if you hear anything different, it's not true. It's incorrect.
And that's the Matthew Checky case where the suspect was Brandon Wilson, and who you interviewed on video, and he walked you through how he killed the little boy in an extraordinarily chilling video. And this knife you're referring to is how Brandon said that he killed this little boy. And
Right.
so there was some wrong information put out there somewhere, and you're correcting that.
Yes.
Okay.
And then with this guy, I really believe he had that knife in that sheath, and his intent maybe wasn't necessarily that he pulled it out, okay, but that it was part of the play after he had committed the act. If he dropped it, then you would expect there would be blood in other areas of that sheath that would be cross-mixed with the victims because of the frenzy and the disorganization of the stabbing in of itself. Okay. A lot of times we forget that taking 4 lives is a lot of effort. It takes a lot of effort to do that. And so if he came in with the idea of how can I throw the authorities off, I'll just leave this post homicide, i.e. they're deceased, and then he stages it, he plants it, but he forgot the snap. Okay. I'm not convinced that he pulled it out and then went on with the sheath in this hand and it got dropped, because and you know me, Karen. I mean, I've worked so many murders and seen so many of these scenes where it's just horrible. And to have just the sheath with no other mix is going to be interesting to find out what else potentially could be on there.
Yeah, it seems almost too convenient the way it was explained in the affidavit that the sheath, was left. It was by Maddie. I think you could argue it either way. You could, it's all that we know, but was it was almost too neat and too, if it was accidental, it landed in a place that was obviously visible and could lend itself to the question, was this thing planted? It wasn't dropped on the floor, it wasn't found under a pillow. It was like right there next to one of the victims' bodies, Maddie's body. So it was kind of an interesting, when you read the affidavit, I mean, that certainly jumps out at you.
Yeah, definitely. And do I believe he would have killed more Boots? Yes, I do. And I love her too. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you,
your
Boots.
kindness.
You're so
And for
sweet.
saying that. It's going to be interesting to find out, right? It's going to be interesting to find out if it was staged or if it was just, part of the frenzy and he dropped it. We don't know. We don't know. What we do know is they didn't mention that there was a cross mixture anywhere on the sheath other than his. They said it's a single source, which caused me some pause to think, okay, if he's got blood on his feet, i.e. he's leaving a footprint from blood, and the beds are saturated in blood, and the victim's blood is everywhere in the scene, how does this sheath all of a sudden just appear and, nothing else is on it? It's just sitting there. Well, he'll know that. He'll know that answer. But what apparently the evidence has shown so far is that somewhere on that snap, and it specifically says the snap, is his DNA or familiar DNA, and they grabbed that out of the trash can. The FBI got it out of his trash can in Pennsylvania on the, when they went back to collect, because they were looking for something that would connect him to that SNAP DNA. I'm going to call it the SNAP DNA. Okay. And TIR, we can make that one. So, but the lack of blood on that sheath should also be concerning. Because then
Well, I don't
Mhm.
know, but I don't know if there's no blood on the sheath because they didn't mention it. What if it was?
Well,
They didn't say. They didn't say.
that's true. That is true. But when they said single source, that kind of makes you think, okay, well, when you write the affidavit, you really want to write it with, an unknown male was found DNA on the snap, including the other victims, A, B, C, or D, was also discovered on the sheath. Okay. So you kind of want to open that up for the judge, because the first question the judge is going to ask is, okay, was there any other DNA on this knife sheath? And you, the affiant, have to say in the in-camera hearings with the judge, well, Your Honor, actually there was, and it belongs to the victims. Or there's a mixture that belongs to the victims, and we do not have those results yet. But instead, in this particular situation, the, Officer Payne, I think that was his name. Let me look here. Yeah, Officer Payne. Yeah, Brett Payne says, look, there's one single source on this knife sheath, and it's on the snap. So now we look at how he operates post-incident, and we try to apply that to, the behavior at the crime scene. Remember, that's what criminal behavior analysis is, right? How does it look at the crime scene? What does it mean? Okay? Not necessarily does it resolve the issue, but what does it look like at the crime scene? And in this situation, we see him taking steps to shut off the phone. We see him taking steps to pass the house 4 separate times. We see his pre-incident behavior where he's surveilling at least 12 separate times, it appears, based on the evidence in the affidavit. And now we see his post-incident behavior where he turns off his phones again, okay? And then he turns them back on, he turns them off again, and now he's, headed eastbound towards Pennsylvania, still wearing gloves, okay? Still wearing gloves to cover something, right? Not necessarily only his hands. He's cleaning the car. That's a good point, Zarp. Absolutely. He's cleaning the car in the wintertime. That's even a better point. Okay. But where was the sheath found? It was found next to, I think, Maddie by her leg in the crime scene on her bed.
It says on the bed next to Maddie.
Right. So the question is if he's pulling this thing out to start the frenzy, okay, and he drops it, that's going to have some type of cast off, I would submit. And this is just my opinion. I could be 1,000% wrong. Okay. And the evidence will show that, okay, i.e. when it comes out. But the fact that it's just kind of there, it's almost like he stood back and he says, okay, plan B. Boom. Let's throw him off. And it comes into that category of when he was arrested, he goes, have anybody else been arrested? It's like this thought process is still continuing itself, from the scene. So, if he was wearing gloves, which if he's wearing gloves post-incident, I would submit to you, he's wearing gloves during the incident. And that he's thought this through. Okay. And I agree with you. I think he started up top, Kathleen. I think he started up top and he worked his way down. And I think the evidence at some point will show that. The cast off will show that. I believe that that FARO, remember we talked about the digital 3D, all of that will show something. And I saw yesterday the authorities, it was reported that they went back into the scene and started removing mattresses and that type of stuff. That's not uncommon. Okay. That's not uncommon because sometimes they can actually create a whole mock-up of the bedroom once it's been torn down. They recreate it to process and work it a little bit closer and a little bit more intimate where they have a lot of time. Okay. They're going to be looking for dog hair in his car because of the dog. They're going to be looking for any kind of evidence, forensic, fiber, anything that connects him back to that car or back to that house. You could even pull his air filter and look into the air filter to see what kind of pollen is in that vehicle's air filter. Because if he says, oh, I wasn't there, and you can also pull the air filter to look to see if he went to that national forest, and then get a botanist to tell you where would we find this type of pollen in that geographic region. And that will put him in the arena. There's all kinds of things that they'll be doing. And if, there's a whole bunch of stuff that they could possibly be pulling in here. Okay, I've got a whole bunch of really great people, and I want to make sure I put some of these up, Karen. So the knife, a sheath, again, I think we answered that.
Yep.
Let's see here. Alley Cats, great seeing you. Do you think that means there was where the massacre started? I believe it started on the 3rd floor and worked its way down. I really do. Thank you, Susan. You're very kind. I think the dog, the silent witness, Murphy, potentially could be a home run.
Now, what was interesting about the dog is before the affidavit came out, we were told that the dog was put in the bedroom that I believe didn't have the roommate. I remember hearing that. And then, of course, the affidavit says the responding officer found the dog in Kaylee and Maddie's room in the bed that they were in. So the dog was right there.
Yeah. And the dog would probably have some type of unfortunate fluids on him, on its paws, or at least that. Okay. There seems to be a code among residents in their home where only veteran frat members handle police matters. Maybe DM tried calling these assigned members, couldn't reach anybody. That I don't know, but that is a good point, 99. And
Could be.
Those of you who know me, I absolutely love that picture and 99 pink balloons because that is Leticia Hernandez. That was a case I worked December 16th, 1989. She was abducted and subsequently murdered. So we'd never forget her. Thank you always for bringing her up. So John said, do you think any of the 12 visits by BK were a dry run, including going into the house? That is a great point. It certainly could be. What do you think, Karen?
We don't know. We don't know. All we know is that his cell phone shows him in that area. So we don't know specifics about that.
Yeah. You want to answer this one?
Do you think police responded prior to 11:58 a.m.? Maybe something is keeping safe, like it was witness. Yeah, we don't know. And of course, they're not going to release the 911 call. They It's part of their investigation, and it's not unusual in missing or murdered cases for that 911 call not to be released to the public.
Yeah. And in which also we got to rethink this October case with the skinned dog in the geographic region. And I think that dog's name was Buddy, if I remember right, the Australian Shepherd.
Yes.
Even though they have said
Isn't that
it's
crazy?
not related, they're still holding that case close to their vest.
And the question is, with that K-bar knife, could you skin a dog?
Yeah, I
With
don't have
that
that
kind of
answer.
knife, could, you
Yeah.
know, that's a question.
Yeah, if anybody can answer that, I don't have that answer, but maybe it's again, I don't know. Sandy, stranger thing is, way to, okay, basically
Oh, what
take his
is
own
it?
life, picking a death penalty state, leaving his, that's always a possibility that he's, transferring his own, mental illness towards this, but he's sophisticated enough to start working towards a PhD. And so I really don't have the answer to that, but that's a great thought. Appreciate you
Thank
both
you, Tamara. Appreciate the comment. Thank you.
very much. Yeah, so Lindsay, great point. But here's the problem. The mainstream media has been, pegging this guy, and then Catherine, who studied BTK, is an expert on BTK. That was his mentor. And so as much as we can kind of keep it back, which you'll notice I have taken, the steps to, pull it back a little to this point. But unfortunately, the genie's out of the bottle. This guy has been plugged in so many different ways, but that is a really good point. But it's not going to make a difference to him, quite frankly. In fact, it may inspire him to tell us more when he feels that he has the notoriety. Go
Interesting.
ahead, Karen. Can you read this one?
Yeah. Do you think he had video surveillance on them? So, Katieberg, is your question, you think he was videotaping the victims? Why else would he race there and choose that night if he wasn't sure M and K were sleeping? It's I don't think we don't know. We don't know yet.
Deborah, is it admissible in court? There will be all kinds of hearings that take place in relationship to what will come in and what will not. So there will be some evidence that will be tossed, and then there will be other evidence that will be admissible for trial. Okay. That's a great point, though. Not everything is a slam dunk. That's always what my adage is. It's never the way you think it is. There is always something. A theory on how BK was able to kill both X and C without one of them being able to get away. There's so many ways that unfortunately, just think of the survivor, what DM did. She froze. So, these young adults with no life experience, anything is possible. And for him, it's a control mechanism. And just think about what we read, where the comment is, "I'm here to help you." That
How
is such
chilling. That was
it is.
insanely chilling. Insane.
And Brandon Wilson did that. If you want to see what that looks like, Dawn, go watch the video on Brandon, where he stands behind Matthew and says, "You know me. I'm here to kill you." So imagine that evil saying, "I'm here to help you." And you just for a second go, "Who is this guy?" Boom, he's on you. And it can be over in less than 4 seconds with the proper wound patterns. So it's scary stuff. It really is. It's scary stuff. Yeah, calm her down just for the second. It only takes a second. Yeah, I don't know, Linda, if he would take a plea. And God bless you. We agree with you. The families, keep them all in our prayers. Do you think he had a drop cloth or covering his seat console? I don't know. That's a great question, though. Karen, what do you think?
Who knows? He may have had something, but again, we can't say for certain. I mean,
Yeah.
we could pick apart a lot of different things, but at this point, everybody would just be guessing. So we don't want to do that.
Yeah, if there's blood found in his car, Zarp, we agree with you. He's done. Look, yeah, he's toast. Do we think this is the stalker? Hannah, that is a great question. I don't know that. We don't know that yet. But if he is, that's even 10 times worse and scarier. The cell phone technology and other technologies will tell us that. At least it will bring us closer to that answer. That is a great question, though, or a great comment as well. If not mistaken, Kylie no longer lived there, but was there for the weekend. Is that correct? I believe she was on her way out, yes, to show the car. She came back to show the car. And so that, again, that is a great point, Lisa. What does that mean in his mindset? What does that mean? Is she in the wrong place at the wrong time?
And did he know? Well, but if he stalked him, did he know that? Was that something that he would have known? We don't know.
Yeah, I thought that was odd. They mentioned the path exiting, but didn't mention his possible entry. Yeah, good point. Thanks, Vet Girl. That is a great point.
Yep.
I'm still of the frame of mind that he came in, and at least he was surveilling from that back there for quite some time. Wonder how a neutral jury will be found. That's a great question. That's up to the defense attorney in the voir dire process. That is a great question. Hopefully they find one. Because that's justice for the victims. Who cares about him? Who cares about that guy? I don't care about him. Personally, I hope they find a jury that will convict him. Would a vegan kill a dog, though? That is a great question. I don't know. Karen, you're a vegan.
It brings up a very interesting point, and I love what Dr. Gary Bercato said about the veganism, and it's part of this extreme, how he characterized who the killer would have this like extreme fetish type of idea, and it sounded like he took it to the nth degree, because we heard that story from his aunt that this guy insisted his parents throw out their pots and pans because they were cooked with meat and buy new ones. So yeah, that was an interesting tidbit about his personality.
I believe this was his first killing. Yes, that is my opinion. Evident of the fact that he made so many mistakes and he's in custody.
Yeah, exactly.
Had he gotten away with it, I'd be worried. I would really be worried. Separate rooms. Yes, we did talk about that, Aaron. Thank you so much for bringing that up. Do I believe he would kill more? Yes. And we answered that one earlier. Would there have been bloody footprints all through the house and outside? Potentially in the house, yes. Outside, it's hard to say. And that's the sound of freedom going overhead, if you can hear it in the background. There would be not only bloody footprints, there would be a lot of transfer. There would be all kinds of the dog. If the dog had access, there would be not only from him but from the dog. Air filter interiors, they could be. Yep, we talked about that. Absolutely. Great point. Pat, love your picture of your puppy there. Let's see here. Do you think the defense can plant enough reasonable doubt? And do you think they can find an untainted jury? Do I believe they can plant enough reasonable doubt? That's always a possibility because you have 15 different personalities that have to listen to it. And if you take a look at just what social media can do, you have people making up fake accounts for this guy, right? Already, Debbie, who are, fans of this guy. He'll get letters. He'll get, love letters. He'll get all kinds of stuff. People will communicate with him. You get one of those persons in a jury without the proper vetting through the voir dire process, you're toast. You're toast. And thank you so much for that question and comment. Maybe he was checking cameras in that 3 hours not accounted for. That is a possibility. That is a possibility. Man, it's still coming. Sorry, guys, I'm missing some of these, so forgive me. I'm trying to get to them all. They're coming fast and furious. We appreciate you. Okay. All right, so I'm trying to pull these up. I just want to I'm going back to make sure I didn't miss anybody. Forgive me. Did the phone ping 12 times around that house? There are 12 separate times that phone did appear in that environment. And if you just joined with us, that was 12 weeks the first time they put in the affidavit to the date of the murder. It was a Sunday night, and then it pinged 12 separate times. So my question is, was that 12 Sundays? We don't know. We just know that it pinged 12 times.
And they gave an example of one of those Sundays was August 21st. So we really don't know if it started pinging prior to that or if they were all after that in those 12 weeks leading up to the date of the murders.
So Lisa, you want to take that one?
Sure. He wants to be caught. Thank you for Lise. Thanks for the question. He wants to be caught. Lots of planning, brutal crime, multiple victims, lots of obvious mistakes, right? Planning post-event, arrest, trial, blah, blah, blah. If he goes free, such as O.J. Simpson. We don't know. I mean, it would take a lot to plan a crime. So I guess what you're saying is he purposely is making mistakes. So he got caught. Is that what you were saying? And so then he becomes this notoriety killer. This guy was immersed in crime and criminology. It makes you wonder. It really, it's a good question. What was his real thinking behind all this? And it goes to motivation. And of course, we don't know that. The affidavit doesn't have to talk about motive. We know that.
Yeah, it was a party house. And that will be also part of the argument that the defense will use, to your point, Sue. So D. Love that. The defense will make that as an argument. Sod. We talked about that earlier. Some other dude. The challenge that he's going to have, again, is the snap that the DNA is actually on the snap. And then so he's going to have to, because what you can do if you're a smart district attorney is you bring everybody that's ever been in that house. You subpoena every one of them as witnesses. Have you been in that house? Yeah, okay, here's a subpoena. Have you? Yep, here's a subpoena. And then you put them all on and you ask one question. And the question is this: did you leave a United States Marine Corps sheath in the bedroom with Maddie? No, sir. No further questions. You're out the door. And if that's what it takes to convict this guy, then it comes back to that one piece of touch DNA on the snap. And now the defense has to make a decision. Do we put our guy up there to explain his touch DNA? Okay. Because they just brought in a truckload of witnesses who've been to that house who said they didn't leave it there. Okay. So you got to think outside of the box, right, guys? There's always a counter to the counter. And that's the workaround for this problem, where if the defense is going to say, yeah, you know, there's a whole bunch of people, you know, that, and this is where you see guys like Mark G showing up and saying, yeah, I could drive a truck through all of, you know, through that affidavit. Well, so could the prosecution if they wanted to, but they just drove a truck, you know, to BK's house. That's all they did so far. They haven't driven it through the courtroom yet. That's coming. And when that comes, you know, everybody's going to go, whoa, wait a minute. We didn't know that. And there's going to be a ton of that. There's still, you know, technically 49% more evidence to show up. And then they just pulled more of that yesterday. They pulled the mattresses and other stuff they pulled out of that house. Okay. Well, all of that's going to probably, you know, they're learning more additional evidence as they're going along that's starting to connect even further along. So I have the utmost, confidence that this investigation's headed in the right direction, unlike some of the others that we've seen, right? Unlike some of the others that we've seen. And we don't know the amount of stab wounds on these victims. That information's never been reported yet, and until those coroner investigations and the ME's reports are released, I'm not going to talk about any of that stuff. Okay, so you know we need to pay attention to the facts as we know them, and as we do here on TIR. What a classy, always a classy, smart group of individuals. Do I believe he was dying, excuse the pun, to tell the world what he has done and how he planned it, Carrie? You know, I think there's part of that, but Dr. Gary would be a better, you know, he'd give us a better answer to that. Just remember that question when he's back on with us with Ann. I think he is upset that he got caught. That would be my first brush, because he worked so hard to get around it. And yet he made all of these mistakes that are going to come, and it's going to end up nailing him to the wall. And I think the SNAP DNA is just a perfect example of that.
Chris, do you think it's bothering him right now, sitting in jail, that he did make so many mistakes and he did caught? Do you think it's eating at his low self-confidence anyway?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And absolutely. Ellen says scenario, he dropped the knife, couldn't go after DM, and a good lawyer will run all over the roommates being home and not calling for 8 hours. Well, you got to be careful, right, Ellen? Those defense attorneys have to be very careful going after the surviving roommates. Juries are much more sympathetic when they put on experts that talk about trauma, you know, and all of a sudden, you know, and I can tell you from personal experience, I mean, Karen and I lost a son in 2003. I was in Disneyland. We were at Disneyland. I can't tell you how we left Disneyland to this day. So I can only imagine what this, young adults gone through. And I can tell you that they got to be careful going after somebody like that. They have to be careful, because to this day, I can tell you the exact moment the phone rang, but I can't tell you much more after that until 3 or 4 days. And any of you that have been through trauma know exactly what I'm talking about. In his perfect, he dropped the sheath as he needed, both hands possibly kill in real life. Can't predict, plan all real life scenarios. Yeah, Karen, Dr. Gary absolutely nailed it on what this guy potentially could have been processing. I agree 100%. I want to be his own case study for his PhD. We talked about that.
Yeah.
We talked about that. Anything's possible. Hang on for a minute. I got to plug my phone in, Karen. Do you want to take this one?
Okay. Criminal gossiper, thank you for the question. Or comment, he would probably have to wash off in the shower after the crime, maybe evidence in his washroom. Yeah, you would hope that, well, we saw investigators go back to that apartment in Pullman, Washington, at Washington State University, and let's hope that they got everything, that they pulled sinks, drains, whatever they needed, and that they got as much as they possibly could of evidence from his apartment. Yeah, between that and the car, the Elantra, those are the key places that are going to have DNA evidence. And obviously, gosh, can you imagine what's on his computer in his
It's going to be
WSU apartment? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to be a lot. It should be a lot for them to get.
Yep. Do you want to take this one?
Yeah, Madison, I thought the same thing. Is it possible to break into a home, kill 4 people, leave the scene in less than 20 minutes? Yeah, with the start of it, with a DoorDash deliverer, right around 4 a.m. Yeah, I mean that compressed time frame is, I think we're all thinking, wow, can it be done in that amount of time? Clearly, it did, if the police have their timeline right, and right now we are going with that is correct. But yeah, it's part of the just chilling shock of these heinous crimes.
Thoughts on that?
Will the trial be televised or on YouTube? So, along with the gag order, the judge has ruled that there be a pool camera in the courtroom. And I'm not sure about live stream at this point, but I know that there's going to be one camera that all the traditional media will be sharing footage from. So we know that that judge is going to be clamping down on the flow of information in and out of the courtroom for this case. We already know that.
Shuts door, Brian. And by the way, we had information that we did not reveal, that there was an eyewitness. I can say now because it's out on the affidavit. And this is while we were working up there in Idaho with the other agency that I was embedded with, helping on the Michael Vaughn case. For those of you that were not aware, I spent 3 months with that agency and worked side by side with them because my expertise is in criminal behavior analysis in relationship to pedophilia, guys that choose children. So anyway, that's the day and that's why we went up there. We just happened to have a day off, and we went up Thanksgiving Day and got this information. But we had talked to other people and firsthand, and they said that they had an eyewitness at that point, but I didn't say anything. I can now because it's out.
Yeah.
You know,
Part of
and
the
that-
affidavit now. Mhm.
part of the affidavit. So
Thank
that
you,
said,
Trudy. Appreciate it. Appreciate your kindness.
so it's okay. I can't wait. Speculation, but my prayers, yes. Ours too. Will Ellie everywhere, especially PA, be checking past and present crimes? That is a great question. I certainly hope so. What do you think, Karen?
I think they're going to do a deep dive, absolutely, into this
Yeah.
guy's past and everything. Yeah, I wanted to just bring up like a final point, another point here. Now that we have Kohberger, behind bars, we've got the affidavit. I couldn't help but think, and maybe some of you felt the same way. Back to that body cam, the Moscow police body cam. It was back on March 2nd of 2022. Now that we know, we don't know if Kohberger would have been in Moscow then. And let's assume that he wasn't. Let's assume that he wasn't on campus at University of Idaho doing anything on March 2nd. But that was that car prowl. And if you guys remember seeing that on YouTube, the police take a report from a student who lived very close to the crime scene, 1122 King Road. And that's where she left her car unlocked. The suitcase was found outside, and several of her items were moved around, and her panties were found in the cup holder of her cup. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is we don't know, but let's assume it wasn't Kohberger. Let's assume he was still at DeSales University in Pennsylvania. So who was it? Who was it? Some other sicko out there. And to me, it got me thinking that, you know what? We cannot say this often enough, how everybody, not just college students, not just female college students, all college students, everyone, we have to take our personal safety
All women.
seriously.
Yeah.
Well, all women, but men too. I mean, if you've got a college age student who's a boy at a university, you want him safe too. And I was just thinking, okay, so there's somebody else, at least, if not one, if not more out there. And again, this isn't to scare people, but it's just to remember good common sense about our personal safety, that, we're not invincible, and that we just need to take common sense steps. We know we've had Greg Cooper, former FBI profiler, on our show how many times? And the message that he has said many, many times is have situational awareness, meaning be aware of your surroundings. Don't make yourself an easy target. Lock your doors, lock your windows. When these murders first happened, we heard from so many local residents in Moscow that, oh, it was a place you didn't have to lock your doors. I say there isn't a place on the planet where you don't lock your doors. You can be in a beautiful, quiet, rural, whatever setting, but we always have to lock our doors. I mean, don't make it easy for somebody to come in. Now, that being said, by no means I'm not blaming the victims. I'm not even talking about the murders right now. I'm just talking about general safety in general, because that March 2nd incident was alarming, shook a lot of people up, including, I can only imagine, the young college student who it happened to. And again, it's a reminder that to do those common sense things. I'm going to go back and just finish my point of, Greg Cooper talks about where are you, who are you with, and what are you doing? Are you doing things that make yourself more of it at risk to be a potential victim, or are you lowering it? And I think if there's any takeaway from any of this, it's a reminder for us to always keep our personal safety first and foremost, not to live paranoid, not to live in fear, but just remember good common sense. And for us to help our friends, our coworkers, family members, each other, when we forget, or check in with each other, and just really, really remember to talk about this. Personal safety shouldn't be something that we talk about after a murder happens. We should be talking about this all the time. Again, without fear and without being paranoid.
One of the many reasons why I married her, everybody. She has common sense and such wisdom. Such wisdom.
Thank you.
That was awesome. Awesome. Let's see here. Hopefully Ellie pieced together missing hours. His phone is off. We agree. Well, Al, thank you so much. Can they use a cell phone location and collaborate? Yes, they can. They can do that. Absolutely. Vet, thank you. Why didn't they just park this scene from outside to in? Removing personal items, do you think that will harm the case? So my thinking on the processing here, right? Whenever these things go down, there are two avenues that you have to think about. The first avenue is who's in the circle, i.e., and what's the victim risk continuum tell you about the victims. So that you work from the inside out. Okay. But the second avenue that you have to consider is the crime scene situation. That's from the outside in. Okay. So it's a reverse. So with the victims, you want to start with the victimology in relationship to who's in their circle, and then you work out from that. With a crime scene, you want to start on the outside because that's where the suspect started. So you want to work in. Okay. And I think the defense will hammer a little bit about those cars being there as long as they were. That should have been, in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, it's not a big mistake, but it is a mistake. They should have impounded those vehicles lickety-split. Even though they weren't involved, they should have just put them into evidence in a secured environment, and that way they can get to them when they get to them. Kind of like they were taking stuff out yesterday from the secured house where nobody could get into it, and the defense had a chance to go in and look at it. They should have done that early on with those cars and plug them in to secured environments. Okay. I think they're going to get a lot of questions about that. Not that it's relevant, because a lot of it's just smoke and mirrors again, right? Because what's going to be relevant is going to be what's inside the house. But here's going to be the question. Okay. Did you find anything connecting my client outside that put him inside? I.e. a fingerprint on any of the cars. Did my client have any fingerprints on the car, detective? Well, no. Okay. Well, in fact, you know that because you collected the car when. But how many other fingerprints did you find on those cars? You know where we just saw that? We just saw that in Suzanne Morphew, where they processed the interior of the vehicle and they found unknown DNA to, 4 or 5 RSOs. But it wasn't specific. It was just, random. And that's the kind of things that I'm talking about here and thinking about it. Okay. The cars, even though they're not evidentiary, yes, they are evidentiary because they belong to the victims. And that's the point. Thank you, Jesse. This is exactly exactly what I'm talking about. Those cars should have been impounded immediately and stuck in a secured location for later processing. Even though they are probably not in any way, shape, or form involved, but you have to check that box as an investigator. You have to check the box. Okay. All right. Do jails serve vegan meals to inmates?
I hope not.
I guess in the 21st century they do. Our jails used to hand them a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and say, make yourself, comfortable because you're going to be here for a while. And do you want bologna tomorrow? That would have been that response. Okay. Bear, Karen, we're almost done here. We've got a lot. Let me jump through a couple more of these. And guys, kind of hold your questions now, if you would. First, you got lots of parties all around. Leventhal is all high. Yeah, this is a good point because it would be a good opportunity for him to blend in. Being visible right in front of you. Right in front of you. So the fact that August 21st was a Sunday is problematic for him. And it was 12 weeks to the day that they put that in there. And then in the affidavit, they said at least 12 times. We don't know if this is what they were referring to, but yeah, Karen and I talked about that as well. We already answered that one. Thank you so much again. Second, I think we answered that. Thank you, Andrea. What's the likelihood of him ever confessing? Great question. Dirty Blue Healer, don't hold your breath with him. I think the odds are going to be against us. Nope, answered that one.
We already had that one. Thank you, BPD. You're so sweet. I'm grateful for all the very, very kind, sweet comments that I'm reading. You guys are awesome. Thank you.
I got a couple more.
You want to take a couple more? There's a few more
I've got
questions. I'm
more and
seeing.
we're done here. Could be DoorDash. Okay. You know what? This is a really interesting idea. Interesting.
But it says, could BK have ordered the DoorDash? But we know that Xana did. We know that Xana had ordered it.
Could be a change of venue, yes. Into Boise, absolutely.
Interesting. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Do you think he disposed of it? Anything is possible. We don't have anything giving us an indication of what he did yet. Spurs. Love the Spurs too, by the way. When the cops reveal as multiple SM profiles, online confession as such, and multiple IP addresses in court, can it be refuted? There's so much. There are experts in that. The CAST team are experts in that, and there are other individuals. There's a program, like I mentioned, Gladiator, that will make sense of all of that stuff. That is an FBI program, and it is a very powerful tool. But you don't know what it does because you won't be able to see it. You can just see a website. It'll make you sign in, and you can't get into it. You got to be law enforcement. With the end of the system, will automatic connect to unsolved? Yes. That is a great point, Madison. Absolutely. With his system now in CODIS, it'll start automatically. The IA, right, or the artificial intelligence, AI, will start to go through and start connecting some of those dots if they exist. He can always plea bargain at any time. Anytime. Does he? Does he have the same birthday?
Do we know that?
Do we know that? That's a great point. Great thought. All right. Everybody, thank you so much. I've got so much going on even tonight. It's not over. So if you get a chance, watch TV. can't tell you who yet, but you'll see. Karen, my sweetheart, and everybody, thank you so very much for being kind to us. Thank you for not believing the rumors, the lies, all the innuendos, all the other stuff that float around the internet. Just remember, ask Abraham Lincoln. He'll tell you everything you need to know on the internet. So, honey, you have the last word as always. And then we're going to go to Hawaii. You're up.
Just want to thank everybody for being here. We have an incredible TIR family. It's growing bigger every day. And we're just so grateful for you, your comments, your support, the emails we get, everything. We're grateful for you. And take care of each other. Have a great week. And, lift somebody else up out there. Everybody's hurting in some way. And let's just remember that when we see each other. And we'll see you guys real soon. Take care.
Hard working every day, I'm stressed out 24/7, babe. No timeouts, wish we could fly away. You and I go to our favorite place. Oh yeah, make special memories together. I'll be your company now and forever. I say we fly away, you and me, go to our favorite place. Feeling the sun on my face in Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. I need a summer breeze, some fresh air to put my mind at ease. No cares. You wanna come with me? Me and you go to our favorite tree. Are you ready now? We jump on a plane now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. Don't hesitate now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. We'll never come down. We're going away. Yeah, we're going away. You and me. Feeling the sun on my face in a